Something was happening around the edges of this final that nobody had planned for. That the biggest match in the football world was arriving on Sunday, surrounded by three separate situations that were all moving simultaneously, and that none of them had a clean resolution yet. The air you breathe to get to the stadium, the players who may or may not be on the pitch, the rules that govern the match itself. Three crises, one final, and the governing body that in the 72 hours before kickoff has been forced to navigate each of them in real time without the institutional machinery designed for anything like this. So what is actually happening? What does it mean for the players, the fans, and the football itself? And which of these three situations is the one that genuinely has no answer yet when the referee blows the opening whistle on Sunday afternoon in East Rutherford? Let's start with the air, because the air is the most visceral and the most immediately human of the three stories, and it started before most people realized it was even a story. Smoke from nearly 900 active wildfires burning across Canada has been traveling more than 1,000 miles southward across the United States for the past week, settling over the Northeast in a haze that by Thursday evening had produced air quality index readings above 200 in parts of New York City. An AQI above 150 is considered dangerous for the general public, according to health authorities. Above 200 is classified as very unhealthy. Above 300 is hazardous. Parts of the metropolitan region surrounding MetLife Stadium were registering readings in that very unhealthy range for consecutive days leading into the weekend of the final. New York and New Jersey both issued formal air quality health alerts. Officials urged residents to stay indoors if possible, to limit outdoor exertion, and to wear masks when going outside. New Jersey state parks reduced swimming area capacity to allow lifeguards and park staff more frequent breaks from the outdoor conditions. The MLS match between Chicago Fire and Vancouver Whitecaps, scheduled for Thursday evening, was postponed entirely due to poor air quality in the area. Robert Lewandowski, who had just signed for the Fire from Barcelona and was due to make his debut in that match, watched it get pushed back to October from the sidelines of a canceled fixture, a detail that in any other week would have been a significant sports story on its own. The air quality in the area expected to improve on Friday, while forecast rain on Saturday should further help disperse some of the smoke. That qualification, expected to improve, is not a guarantee. It is a weather forecast, and weather forecasts for events of this scale have a particular kind of fragility when the stakes are this high and the window is this narrow. Here is the specific detail that makes the air quality situation more complicated than it might appear on the surface. MetLife Stadium has a retractable roof. The match itself, once the building is sealed, will take place in a climate-controlled environment that largely insulates the players on the pitch from whatever is happening in the air above New Jersey on Sunday afternoon. That protection is real, and it matters, but it extends only to the boundary of the stadium. Everything outside that boundary, the parking lots, the approach roads, the miles of walking routes from the transit stations that most fans without cars will use to get to the stadium, the closing ceremony rehearsals that have been running throughout the week, all of that sits in the open air that public health authorities in 2 states have formally warned against extended outdoor exposure to. A contractor named Dan Edgar, who has been working around the stadium ahead of the final, told a broadcaster that his daughter, Caitlin, who is rehearsing for the closing ceremony at the stadium, described the conditions as difficult. She texted him during rehearsal, "It's bad out there." That's not a clinical air quality reading. That's a human being in the place where the final is being prepared, telling her father what it actually feels like to be there right now. World Cup organizers confirmed they were monitoring the situation closely on Friday, with a meteorologist from the National Weather Service sitting inside FIFA headquarters to provide real-time assessments. Authorities are monitoring whether wildfires burning across Canada will impact Sunday's final. Monitoring. Not resolved, not cleared, not confirmed safe. Monitoring. The human truth underneath that institutional language is this: 80,000 people are going to travel to MetLife Stadium on Sunday in conditions that public health authorities have told them to avoid if possible. Some of them will have underlying health conditions, some will be elderly, some will be traveling with children. all of them will spend extended periods outside the climate-controlled protection of the stadium before they get inside. And the organization responsible for their experience has confirmed it is watching the situation rather than having a publicly disclosed contingency plan for what happens if the conditions don't improve as the forecast suggests they might. This is a pattern this tournament established from the beginning. In the weeks before the first match was played, FIFA's air quality contingency protocols for the entire tournament had not been publicly disclosed. Organizations hosting outdoor sporting events in Canada had published clear thresholds for when games would be postponed or moved. FIFA's equivalent framework was not publicly available. The tournament proceeded without that transparency. And now, in the final hours before the final itself, the absence of a public protocol is visible again in exactly the situation that protocol was designed for. Now, let's move to the second crisis, because this one involves names and numbers and the decision that was confirmed on Friday and that has not been reported clearly enough anywhere. Cristian Romero, Lisandro Martinez, Giovanni Lo Celso, Nicolás Otamendi, Leandro Paredes, and at least one other player whose identity has been variously reported across different sources. These are the 6 Argentine players who held or were photographed near a banner reading "Las Malvinas son Argentinas" in the celebrations after the semi-final victory over England in Atlanta on July 15th. The banner was taken from supporters in the stands by Lo Celso and then held aloft by the group on the pitch, with the banner subsequently laid out on the turf where it was visible to cameras broadcasting to the entire world. FIFA's rules on this are explicit. Article 34.3 of FIFA's disciplinary code bans the display of any political messages or slogans by players before, during, or after a match. The rule is not ambiguous. The banner is not ambiguous. The photographs are not ambiguous. And the calls for the players involved to be banned from the final came from multiple directions simultaneously. The Liberal Democrat leader wrote to FIFA's president calling for immediate suspension of all 6 players before Sunday. The chair of the Falkland Islands Legislative Assembly wrote a separate letter saying the assembly was disappointed but not surprised by the actions taken. The UK government issued a statement. 6 million people signed the petition on a website called ArgentinaOut.com, demanding Argentina's removal from the tournament entirely. And here is what FIFA decided. No ban will be issued before the final. The disciplinary committee is assessing the match reports and considering the relevant circumstances before deciding on potential further steps. But no decision will be reached until the World Cup has ended, meaning those involved will be able to play in Sunday's final without any issues. Romero starts at center back. Martinez starts beside him. Lo Celso is in the squad. Paredes is in the squad. Every player photographed with that banner will be available for selection on Sunday. This was the confirmed position as of Friday morning. Here's where things get interesting, because the precedent structure here is more complex than most reporting has acknowledged. There are not one, but 2 separate precedent cases involving Romero and Lo Celso personally with FIFA's disciplinary proceedings. The first is the 2014 banner case, where Argentina were fined 30,000 Swiss francs for displaying an identical message before a friendly against Slovenia. That precedent established the baseline. Fine, reprimand, no suspension, no player bans. But the second precedent is the one that adds a layer that complicates the simplicity of the no action before the final narrative. In the aftermath of the suspended 2021 World Cup qualifier between Brazil and Argentina, FIFA launched an investigation into the conduct of players who had provided false information on immigration forms related to COVID protocols. The verdict, handed down months later, included 2 match bans for Emiliano Martinez, Emiliano Buendia, Cristian Romero, and Giovanni Lo Celso. 4 of the players involved in that case are the same players photographed with the banner in Atlanta, Lo Celso and Romero specifically. Both of them have previous FIFA disciplinary records that include match bans. The question of whether that prior record constitutes a relevant circumstance in the current assessment is one FIFA's disciplinary committee is now weighing. The strongest argument in defense of FIFA's decision not to act before the final deserves to be stated clearly and completely.
The due process protections built into FIFA's disciplinary framework are not bureaucratic inconveniences. They exist to protect players and associations from being punished on the basis of incomplete information before their position has been properly considered, under timeline pressure that can produce unjust outcomes. If FIFA had attempted to ban 6 players from a World Cup final on 4 days' notice, the legal challenges to that decision would have begun immediately. Argentina's legal team would have sought emergency arbitration. CAS could have been convened on an expedited basis. The result could have been a final played under legal injunction, with the players participating while the proceedings were outstanding, creating a situation more chaotic than the one the process was designed to avoid. UEFA served a one-match ban on Alvaro Morata and Rodri after they chanted "Gibraltar is Spanish," following their Euro 2024 final win over England. That decision was processed after the tournament. It is the model. That is the strongest case for the defense. Here is where it creates its own problem. UEFA's Morata and Rodri case is cited as the model for post-tournament processing, but those bans covered the next competitive match after the offense, which was a UEFA Nations League fixture weeks later. For Argentina, the next competitive match after the final is a 2030 World Cup qualifier. The practical consequence of suspending Lo Celso or Romero for one match is a qualifier against a team that poses no realistic threat to Argentina's progression, watched by a domestic audience rather than an 80,000-person final crowd and a global television audience of 500 million. The emotional and sporting proportionality between that punishment and the scale and context of the incident that prompted it is, to put it gently, not obvious. This isn't the first time Argentina have navigated disciplinary proceedings without material consequence to their tournament participation. The 2022 World Cup celebrations included a FIFA disciplinary case for offensive behavior during the final, which was processed after the tournament and produced a fine. Emiliano Martinez's crude gestures with the trophy during those same celebrations were part of the same case. The same names, the same pattern, different specific incidents, the same outcome. Post-tournament processing that allows the tournament itself to proceed without sanction. Now let's go to the third crisis, because this is the one that involves the match itself, rather than the environment around it or the players in it. And it's the one that, of the three, has the most direct effect on the 90 minutes of football that billions of people are going to watch on Sunday afternoon. FIFA confirmed a star-studded halftime show featuring Madonna, Shakira, Justin Bieber, and BTS, curated by Chris Martin of Coldplay. The announcement was extraordinary in its ambition. 5 of the most commercially recognizable musical acts in the history of the global entertainment industry performing simultaneously in the interval of a World Cup final. From a marketing perspective, it is the most ambitious halftime production in the history of football. It is also the clearest and most documented violation of a FIFA rule committed by FIFA itself across this entire tournament. Law 7 of the laws of the game is unambiguous. The interval at halftime shall not exceed 15 minutes. Not 15 minutes as a target, 15 minutes as the law. The same law that governs every FIFA-affiliated match from the World Cup final to a Sunday League fixture in any affiliated nation. The same law that was in force when FIFA confirmed a halftime production that reports indicate will run for approximately 30 minutes. The 15-minute rule exists for documented sporting reasons. Physiologists who study elite athletic performance consistently note that beyond 20 minutes of inactivity, players begin to lose the physiological readiness required to return to competitive match intensity without a structured re-warm-up. Beyond 25 minutes, the re-warm-up becomes a physical necessity rather than an option. At 30 minutes, both squads will require protocols that normal halftime routines are not designed to accommodate.
Lionel Scaloni's backroom staff and Luis de la Fuente's coaching teams have both been working around this in the days before the final, planning re-warm-up protocols, managing the transition from the tactical instruction period of the interval to the physical preparation period that a 30-minute break requires. This is not a hypothetical inconvenience. It is a concrete alteration to the match conditions that neither team was consulted about and that neither team can change. And it sits in a tournament where every competitive decision has been scrutinized for its fairness implications. The BBC announced it would not broadcast the halftime performance at all, maintaining its traditional coverage with studio analysis of the first half. That decision, from one of the world's most respected broadcasting institutions, was made without explanation of the reasoning behind it, but it speaks for itself. In the judgment of the organization that has covered World Cup finals for decades, the 30-minute entertainment production is not the content its audience came to this match to watch. FIFA confirmed the show would be broadcast live to millions of fans around the world and did not address the Law 7 violation in any public statement. The precedent from the 2025 Club World Cup final, where a 25-minute halftime break was used for the first time, served as the organizational proof of concept. But a proof of concept is not an authorization under the laws of the game, and the specific gap between 25 minutes and 30 minutes matters, because at 25 minutes the physiological research suggests borderline impact, and at 30 minutes it suggests meaningful impact on competitive readiness. Think about the specific players for whom this matters most. Messi, at 39 years old, in what he has confirmed is his final World Cup match, managing a body that requires increasingly careful recovery and preparation protocols compared to younger teammates. Rodri, Spain's midfield linchpin, returning from injury and managing his minutes across this tournament. Every player on both squads who has a pre-existing soft tissue concern that a normal 15-minute interval keeps manageable and that a 30-minute cold period might aggravate. This is not speculative concern. This is documented sports science applied to the specific circumstances of a match that FIFA unilaterally decided would include a halftime entertainment production that violates the law governing the competition it's organizing. Now, here is the human truth that sits underneath all three of these crises when you put them together. What happened in the 72 hours before the World Cup final is a portrait of an organization managing its own ambitions in real time. The air quality situation it cannot control. Wildfire smoke does not respond to organizational authority, but its lack of a publicly disclosed contingency protocol reflects a pattern of opacity that stretches back to the tournament's opening week. The banner situation it could have anticipated. Argentina have displayed this exact message before. The same players have previous disciplinary records, and the precedent for how this case would be processed was established in 2014 and again in 2022. And yet, the confirmation of no pre-final action arrived not through proactive communication, but through a statement issued after external pressure made silence untenable. And the halftime show it designed itself, contracted itself, announced itself, and scheduled itself in violation of its own law without ever publicly acknowledging the contradiction. This is the sentence that this entire tournament has been building toward for 6 weeks, not just across these three crises, but across every formal complaint, every VAR controversy, every empty hotel lobby, every attorney general subpoena, every unanswered letter from the Falkland Islands Legislative Assembly. FIFA doesn't break its own rules in moments of crisis. It breaks them in moments of ambition, and then manages the consequences later when the audience has already moved on to the next match. What do you think? Of the three simultaneous crises hitting the World Cup final in its final hours, which one do you believe has the most serious long-term implications for how this tournament will be remembered? Does FIFA's confirmed decision to process the banner case after the tournament rather than before the final represent appropriate due process or a pattern of deferred accountability that protects one team's participation regardless of the circumstances? And when Messi or Yamal lifts the trophy on Sunday evening and the image goes around the world, will the three stories we've documented today be footnotes to that image or the frame around it? With FIFA's air quality monitoring status still updating, with the disciplinary proceedings on the banner confirmed as ongoing past Sunday, and with a halftime show about to run twice the legal length in the interval of the biggest match in football, we are absolutely not done with any of these stories, even after the trophy is handed over. Subscribe so you're here for every development. Like this video if the conversation matters to you, and drop your answer in the comments, because this final deserves the most honest conversation about what surrounds it that this tournament has yet had.